here we are. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning. We're on the tracks of a small bunch of gooks, maybe 5 or 6 in number, and it looks as though the follow-up is proceeding very nicely. They're unaware of us. There's no indication of any anti-tracking, and I estimate that sometime in the afternoon, maybe 3-4 o'clock, we will make contact with them. The only thing that's troubling me a little bit is that in the distance, naturally way out of sight over the horizon, is a sweep line. Other elements of the Rhodesian army not associated with us, that are on a separate operation, and they're moving in our direction. Well, of course, the gooks that we're following don't know this, and we have to just go where they go. But I'm not alarmed yet. I reckon I've got about another hour and a half or so before I'm going to have to make a decision whether to leave this bunch to blunder into the sweep line, or whether to stick with it and see if I can get to them first. And it was with these thoughts in my mind that a contact suddenly breaks out to the northwest. It sounded pretty close, so we stop and I wait for the reports to come through, and I plot the position of the contact on my map, and I can see, well, they're about 2-3 grid squares away from us, which is not a great distance on the map, but it's still quite a bit of a walk. Anyway, I stop and wait a while to see if there's anything else, if we are perhaps needed. When I hear that the stick leader reporting to his superior tells them that his intention is to move on to some high ground, there have been no casualties either side during that contact, and he wants to just observe the terrain and see if he can see the people that they were engaged in and what direction they're taking. So I leave them to get on with their work, and we pick up the follow-up again, and eventually, of course, we arrive to a spot where we see the gooks must have been when they heard the contact break out. And this resulted in them doing a very sharp right turn. And I could see in the distance some hills, and it looked very much as though they were heading for one of those features. Now, there were 4 of us in the call sign. Was myself, an MAG gunner, a rifleman, and then an excellent tracker on loan to us from the Department of Wildlife. First class man. And so we proceeded following these tracks. And we got to the base of one of these hills, and the tracker whispered to me, I don't think that they've moved off this feature. I think they're just a couple of 100 yards ahead of us. So we started to climb up the side of this hill. Lots of boulders, huge boulders tumbled around with scrub bush growing in between them and waist-high grass. So we started climbing slowly, and then the tracker stopped me and he said, they're very, very close. I think I heard voices a moment ago. So very carefully, I sent the MAG gunner and the rifleman off to my right, with instructions that if they caught sight of the enemy, just to open up. Don't wait for myself to initiate the contact. Just drill the blokes as soon as you see them. And it was nice now, because we had the 2 men on the flank and ourselves to the front, myself and the tracker. And this is what you want to do. You want to get them in a crossfire like that, and they can't move backwards or sideways or anywhere unless there's favorable cover for them. And I thought, we're going to get some today. We're going to get these guys. And we started going forward very, very slowly, very slowly. And I thought I saw movement. So I raised my weapon. It had been taken off safe for some time now. I was ready to fire at a moment's notice. And I looked very carefully through the trees, trying to see where it was that I saw movement a moment ago. And I had my weapon trained on that spot, and I was ready to open fire when suddenly the tracker next to me shouted at the top of his voice, don't shoot, they're our guys, they're our guys. Well, you can imagine when a cat is about to pounce or a snake is about to strike and you try and stop that, it's almost impossible. And I was in that position that I was so close to open up, because just at that moment when he started shouting, I saw movement and I thought, I'm going to nail this guy. And, a lot of thoughts were going through my mind, in the space of a couple of heartbeats. I'm asking myself, is it really our guys that he's seen there? Is he mistaken? If he's mistaken, I know what's going to happen next. There's going to be a lot of fire coming in our direction because the alarm would have been sounded. And I can't verify what he's telling me because I can't see exactly who's in the bush on top of the hill. But thankfully, I heeded his warning, and I shouted to the men on the flank as well, added my voice to that of the tracker, don't shoot. And then we made our way through the boulders onto the top of the hill, and I'm talking of a distance of maybe 20 yards, certainly not 50 yards, that distance would be too great. Between 20 and 40 yards, there were these guys, 4 men, Rhodesian forces, on top of this hill, blissfully unaware that we had been creeping up on them. And of course, I was pretty annoyed. I was very relieved that we hadn't shot at them, because, it would have been awful. They would not have given way. They would have returned fire, the survivors, and we would not have given way, and there would have been an almighty punch up on top of that hill over there. So I said to the guy, what are you doing here? Who are you guys? And he got a little bit fed up with me too, because he could see that they had just escaped death. And he was asking me the same questions. So it turned out this was the call sign that had the contact about an hour before. And I said to him, what are you doing here? You radioed through a position, you said you were moving on to some high ground. He said, that's where I am. I said, no, you sent through a lockstat, and I've marked it on the map over here. You're miles away from where you're supposed to be. You must be more careful with your map reading. And he got pretty annoyed. And, I thought, before we have an argument here in front of the men, let me just double check my own position, because perhaps I am where he said he was. And I took bearings off the hills around. I did it 2 or 3 times. No ways. I was correct. This guy was totally in the wrong position. And he had radioed through a position that was far to our north. So I said to him, I'm sorry, but you are wrong. And he walked off. He wouldn't speak to me. And I thought, well, we're not here to debate the issue. I've made my point. And we can be thankful that nobody's got injured or wounded, but I still got to find where these gooks are. So I said to the tracker, what has happened here? And he said, well, the gooks came up on the hill, and they, by the looks of things, hadn't been here very long when they saw this call sign coming up the hill from the north, and so they've bombshelled and scarpered. And we went down the other side of the hill, and sure enough, I saw where these guys had run for it. There's all these skid marks in the grass, men in wild flight, in a panic to try and get away. They must have thought these soldiers knew that they were up there. And I distinctly remember thinking to myself, boy, if Zimbabwe ever becomes independent one day and it enters the Olympic Games, they're going to walk away with all the medals for athletics, because it was unbelievable. Some of the places that these men just leapt, like almost 10 meters down onto the boulders beneath them to try and get away. But I saw that the group had dispersed completely, and listening to the radio reports coming through, the sweep line had now moved quite close to us, and I said to the tracker and to my other two men, look, I'm abandoning this thing. There are just too many people in the bush today. Let's just get out of everybody's way, and we'll do a follow-up another day when things are more in our favor. But I've got to tell you, that if it wasn't for that tracker, if it wasn't for his sharp eyes and his quick reaction, there would have been a terrible engagement over there. And for sure, I think we would have killed some of those blokes, if not all of them, up there, because they were taken totally by surprise. And it's a sobering thing. And I was always very careful with my map reading, because I was aware of the possibility of bumping into another call sign. And I mean, I have seen the results of this kind of thing at first hand. I can remember two call signs walking into each other at the bottom of Gotta Hill one night. And I mean, myself and the platoon commander and a few of the other men, we arrived there probably about 20 minutes after that engagement was finished. And it was awful to see our own men wounded. And again, neither of them gave way. They fought almost, as it were, to the bitter end. And it's not a nice sight to see men wounded and broken like that. Those R1s are terrible weapons. If they hit you, they do an incredible amount of damage. So anyway, that day, it was a story with, I think, a happy ending. Nobody got hurt. Yes, tempers were a bit frayed, but thanks to that man's sharp eyes, we all lived to fight another day.